Well, welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here with us. My name is Sister Colleen Gibson. I'm a sister of St. Joseph of Philadelphia, and it's so great to see so many familiar faces. I'm just going to cover some business here up front as we allow all our participants to kind of get into the room and to settle in. We're so happy that you're here with us tonight. These conversations that we've been having on a monthly basis. And we're really excited to just continue the conversation around women deacons, and especially as we come together tonight to talk about women deacons, the call to serve, and really the vocation of the diaconate and the vocation of women deacons. So out front, I just have a couple of housekeeping details that we're going to go through before we enter into tonight's program. As I said, these are monthly conversations, and so they're recorded. So we invite you to just sit back, relax, and enjoy, take in whatever, and then a recording of tonight's conversation will be posted to Phyllis's website, and I'll post a link to her website in the chat box, and you'll be able to visit. You can watch previous webinars up there as well. You can also sign up, and I'll put a link in the chat to receive Phyllis's column. And so tonight, the format for our conversation will be similar to what our typical format. So we'll begin with a little bit of input from Dr. Zagano on women deacons, especially in the area of vocation. And then we'll move into a question and answer session. And a number of you have submitted questions in advance. But if, as you're listening, as you're taking in this evening's program, if a question comes to mind, I would invite you to use the chat function. So if you're new to Zoom, across the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little voice bubble, and that's the chat function. If you click on that, you can send a chat, and I would invite you to send chats directly to me if you have a question that you'd like to ask. I have a list of, I have about 3 pages of questions, but things are always stirred up. The spirit is moving among us. So I would invite you, if a question piques your interest and you'd like it posed, to just put it into the chat box, and I'll gather those as we go. Tonight, I'll be kind of our guide, the voice of the people, because we have so many people. We have nearly 200 so far on our call. And so we just look forward to a wonderful evening. You can mark your calendars for our next webinar. Our next webinar will be on Thursday, May 20th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, or whatever time it is where you are right now. I know we have some people on from Europe, some people on from Australia, throughout the United States and North America. So you can mark your calendar for this same time on Thursday, May 20th. Yeah, just keep an eye on the chat for links that we may post throughout, and I will keep an eye out to gather together questions. And so I think that covers all of the housekeeping items up front. And so I'd like to welcome you again, and welcome Dr. Phyllis Zagano, who will be our conversation partner this evening. And so by way of introduction of Phyllis, Dr. Phyllis Zagano is Senior Research Associate in Residence and Adjunct Professor of Religion at Hofstra University. She's the author or editor of over 23 books in religious studies, including her newest offering, Women, Icons of Christ from Paulist Press. Dr. Zagano's books also include Women Deacons, Past, Present, and Future, Women in Ministry, Emerging Questions on the Diaconate, Mysticism and the Spiritual Quest, and Women Deacons, Essays with Answers. Her award-winning Just Catholic column runs monthly in the National Catholic Reporter, and her work has won numerous awards and has been translated around the world. In August of 2016, Pope Francis appointed her to the Papal Commission for the Study of Women in the Diaconate. That commission completed its report to the Pope at the end of 2018. And so it's my great pleasure to be able to engage her in conversation tonight, and for us all to be able to engage in a dialogue around women deacons. And so without further ado, I'll hand it over to Phyllis.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Colleen, and thanks to everybody for taking the time. This week is kind of vocation week. The USCCB has actually a website devoted to the promulgation of vocations. You may have heard something about vocations yesterday on what's traditionally known as Good Shepherd Sunday. And So we thought that given the talk about vocation and the conversation that we hope happened yesterday in your church, we would talk about vocations tonight. I had the opportunity to write a homily, not that as a layperson I can give a homily, but Deacon Jim Nipper in Princeton invites folks to write homilies, and I have the one for this Sunday of the fourth Sunday of Easter. I'm not going to read the homily to you, but the beginning is the theme of today's readings, that is the readings for yesterday, is who we are and who we're called to be. And that to me is what it's all about. You know, when the most significant question we have is, you know, who am I and what am I supposed to do about it? So tonight we want to engage you in the question of vocation, specifically the vocation to the diaconate, and specifically the vocation to the diaconate for women. I just want to straighten out a few things, mainly because of conversations I've had recently. Folks aren't real clear. I had an auxiliary bishop of my own diocese last week tell me that deacons were not clerics, and he heard this from a canon lawyer. And that's just not true. Actually, in the past, since the restoration of the permanent the diaconate as a permanent vocation, the diaconate, not tonsure, is the ordinary means of entering the clerical state. And so we have deacons, priests, and bishops who are clerics. Now, everybody, when I used to teach this, I'd make a box, and I'd say you only have 2 feet, and you're allowed to stand in only 2 boxes. One box is a lay person, the other box is a cleric. Then another box is you're a secular person, and the other box is you're religious. Now, what is all this? I think the confusion comes when we talk about secular. But a secular person it's defined negatively as someone who's not a religious. So you can be a lay religious. Who's a lay religious? Well, religious brothers are lay religious. Religious sisters, women religious, are lay religious. Who's a secular lay person? Well, that's you and me. For the most part, the people on board here are lay people who are seculars. They're not religious. What about a secular cleric? What's that? Well, a secular cleric is what you see in your diocese. It's the diocesan priest, diocesan deacon, diocesan bishop. All right. Now, it gets confusing. Some diocesan bishops are religious, such as Cardinal Mahoney, who's Cardinal O'Malley, who's a Capuchin Franciscan, and a few others. Then you have another vocation. Okay. And the vocation is to marry or not. Okay. Marriage is the most significant, really, decision I think people make. You know, are we going to marry or are we not going to marry? So you have married clerics and you have single clerics, okay, unmarried clerics. Married clerics now can be deacons. The church law is that a married man can be ordained, but an ordained man cannot be married. We have a few married priests in the United States, certainly many Eastern church married clerics, married priests. We have had in our history a couple of married bishops, even in contemporary history, but that's kind of an outlier there. And then you have single clerics. Well, who are the single clerics? Well, the single clerics by diocesan law, by church law, are the secular priests, and certainly the religious priests. Religious priests, men who belong to religious orders or institutes, take vows. They profess vows typically of poverty, chastity, and obedience. A secular cleric does not vow celibacy. A secular cleric promises to obey the laws of the church, which include the fact that he will not get married. He promises to obey his bishop, and he promises to obey his bishop in living simply. Okay, so then we have religious clerics, we have secular clerics, again, priests, bishops, and deacons. But when you get to the clerical state, I think you find that there are no women. and recently, at least in the Latin Church. I'm not prepared now to list the various Eastern Orthodox churches that have women deacons, but there are some. And I actually just got a mailing yesterday of a huge amount of research on Russian Orthodox women deacons in the 19th century. But what we want to do is we want to engage you in conversation about vocation. And to do that, a couple of things have happened recently. There's an initiative called Discerning Deacons. And Discerning Deacons is an initiative that's really just started up. They launched, I think, at noon today. And it's headed by 3 people, one in Miami, one in the far west in California, another in North Carolina. And they are creating space for conversation. This is the same group of individuals who presented a St. Phoebe Day event in September, and I was really happy to see it. And in that event, they had a prayer service, and in the prayer service, they had testimony. And so I want to kind of give you an idea, because one of the testimonies all the testimonies were wonderful, but one of them that I saw kind of struck me, because I get letters like this and phone calls like this every day. Someone is writing saying, I really think I have a vocation to the diaconate and I don't know what to do about it. But I want to give you an idea of the type and quality and level of individual who feels called to service in our church as a woman deacon, to be ordained and be able to serve our church in that way, and also kind of the struggles that she has. So I've asked one of the people who, and I hope Colleen can list that website, one of the Discerning Deacon heads named Luke Hansen. He's going to roll tape, but first let me introduce the woman whom you will hear from. Her name is Kayla August, and she's from New Orleans, Louisiana. And the introduction to her says, a love of God brought this Southern girl to the Midwest, where she spent her first 3 years in South Bend, Indiana, as assistant director of evangelization in the University of Notre Dame campus ministry. And in fact, she is currently the rector of a pretty big women's hall, a Lions Hall, at the University of Notre Dame. Kayla received her baccalaureate degree and a master's degree in pastoral counseling from Loyola University, New Orleans, a Jesuit school. And serving others is a core part of her life. She actually spent a large part of the past 12 years volunteering her summers at a place called Camp Challenge, which is a camp for children with cancer and sickle cell, and also Camp Pelican, which is a camp for children with asthma and cystic fibrosis, where she was the director of activities. Kayla's love for service continues as a mentor to youth at Transformation Ministries in South Bend, Indiana, and she is planning to pursue a doctorate in preaching as a way to serve God by giving her voice to the church. So assuming that we don't blow up the Zoom, I'm going to ask Luke Hansen to roll tape, and then we'll come back and take your questions, okay? So Luke, if you've got it.
Women's Diaconate is about women finding their voice. As a Black Catholic woman with a call to preach, I have never felt a more urgent need for voices like mine in our church and in our country to be able to be heard, because we see what happens when they aren't. They have the voice of women not only at religious gatherings or in classrooms, but also at the altar, where as a community, we come together weekly to praise, worship, and hear God moving in all of our lives. As I work as a minister of an all-female hall at the University of Notre Dame, I heard this call all summer and I knew I needed to use it. But as coronavirus does, it changed a lot of things. And my all-female hall was joined with others to share in the Eucharistic celebration. And though it was a gift to be united with my brother halls, all male halls, in this shared Eucharistic celebration, I realized that much would change. Our dorm liturgies that had been predominantly led by women serving as lectors, musicians, Eucharistic ministers would now resume to a male-dominated space. And that in an instant, I lost all of my pastoral authority. Unlike the men around me, as the pastor, a female pastor of my community, the pastoral authority I had created by squeezing in a word during the closing announcements or making a short welcome address was at risk of being completely lost. So I addressed this to the group of men. 4 men, 3 of them were clergy. And I asked them to make room. And I watched. As my brothers in Christ wrestled with this notion like Jacob wrestled with the angel. But they weren't just wrestling with themselves. They were wrestling with the church that had not yet made a space for a woman to speak with authority at the Eucharistic table. For them, a woman's voice was lost not by intention or malice, but by default. Because the space was not yet created at the altar, the most sacred space for prayer. And while I feared that loss, the men feared other things. They feared what would happen if they made a space for me to preach about the word. They cited concerns about rocking the boat, using the pulpit as a platform, complaints about what our students would say, or worse, receiving a letter from the bishop denouncing our community's prayer. And then the question came, is this for you or for them, Kayla? A question I was prepared to answer because I had lived the answer. A question I sat with for years as I considered more than once about leaving this church, fearing that being Black and a woman and a part of other marginalized communities, that perhaps I loved the church in a way that they couldn't love me back. I questioned it when I looked outside the church for true equality, instead of expecting it inside the walls of my father's house. Both, I answered. It's for both. So that I can speak for and on behalf of a community that needs to have a voice. The struggles of a community that I know because I am a part of that community. How can my women imagine what they have not yet seen? How can they begin to hope for more when they have not been given an avenue in which to do so? It's not just for me, because this isn't Kayla's work. It's God's work. Because in earnest, when we omit the voice of women from the altar, it trickles down in other areas too. It's my women informing me that when they sit on our religious council of gathered halls, that men continue to talk over them. And instead of challenging that, they just say, it's okay, Kayla, when we all know that it's not. It's not giving our women's spaces the best pastor or best resources because they cannot produce the vocations that we seem to value as the church. It's continuing to give women the scraps at the table, like a small opening welcome, and convincing them that it's a banquet. It's the fear that if their voice doesn't matter to God who loves them, in the place where they know, my women know he is always found, then maybe their voice simply doesn't matter. In boardrooms, in meetings, in households, on committees, and in dark corners of parties where their voice needs to be heard most. It's having women sit in silence and in irritation when the men around them live by different rules and can dream in ways they have not been allowed to. And it doesn't just hurt the women, it hurts all of us. It puts the burden on the marginalized to create ways of squeezing into cracks inside instead of being truly invited to the table. It allows men to be the end-all be-all voice in religious spaces until we find that they misassociate the power bestowed on them as not of service, but as one of control. They no longer see themselves as instruments, but as the answer. It's the fear of being united by proximity in the pews, but not truly being united in spirit and in truth. It's knowing that by leaving part of the congregation behind, we lose the ability to know that we are all church not contained inside four walls, but living and breathing and moving and alive. A communal church where the eye cannot say to the ear, I do not need you, and where the hand cannot say to the foot that you don't belong to the body. A church where every person truly matters. Our only place to speak should not be contingent on a diocese or on a particular pastor allowing us to. It should be based on the fullest expression of God that we need to know in order to better know the love of God. It is stated in Genesis, in his image and likeness, male and female, he created them. But at present, we only hear from one half of God. It is still good, as God always is, but it is incomplete. But today I carry hope. I carry hope like Phoebe carried that letter. A hope that my brothers in Christ continue to wrestle until they are transformed. To not be afraid. To be less afraid of the consequences of a letter from the bishop and more afraid of what will be lost if women's voices are truly erased. I hope that people with power to open the door will move into a vision not yet seen. And I hope that we move into this vision as a church and make space to ensure that the God who equally loves all of us can be heard equally through each and every one of us on the altar and around the world.
Thanks.
Wow, this is powerful. Very, very powerful.
Now, that's about the third or fourth time I've seen that. And I can tell you that I would go any place to hear Kayla preach the gospel. Because in my parish, too often I hear about what the priest just saw on Netflix or what happened to him in the 8th grade, and not a whole lot about the gospel of the day. And I think that we deserve not only to hear woman's voice, but the voice of people who are imbued with the gospel. And, you know, as a, because I write, there are a couple of words she used are not quite correct. She isn't exactly the pastor of the hall, but I can understand. She's not really talking about being at the altar. She's talking about being in the sanctuary. And that was the big thing that the Holy Father did with Spiritus Domini in January 11th of this year, saying women can be installed as lectors and acolytes. That's legally, officially, formally saying women are allowed on the other side of the fence of the altar rail. In terms of pastoring a place, Canon 517, paragraph 2 allows for parish life coordinators who are lay people and or deacons and or married and or single and or religious or secular. And about 67% of the parishes and parish groupings in Atlanta, in the Amazon are of that ilk. That is, they have women leading them, but they don't have formally installed or formally appointed parish life coordinators. Colleen's getting questions. I see stuff coming up in the chat. So why don't we just talk as we recover from Kayla's passion?
Yeah, there's a number of questions. Praise for Kayla and for that powerful testimony, the powerful preaching. I think really, sharing and breaking open her experience and the Word of God lived out in everyday life. So some people have asked for contact information, for a link to her testimony. So we would direct you to discerningdeacons.org. I think Casey Stanton just put a link in there. You can get, the full prayer service from St. Phoebe Day is there. And it's a wonderful website. As Phyllis said, it launched today. So It is bright and vibrant, and they're still working out some kinks. So if you hit a link that might be a little dead end, don't worry about it. It'll all come out in the wash. We're all a work in progress, but it is a wonderful resource. So I would really direct you there, and we'll list that resource again as we move on. Yeah, so let's get to some questions then, Phyllis. So you mentioned vocation, and so we had a number of vocation questions come in, and we had a number of questions come in from deacons. But because we're picking up on that vocation thread and Good Shepherd, we had it's actually a religious sister write in and talking about vocations, and she says, at my parish this weekend, they marked the World Day of Prayer for Vocations, as we mentioned. The priest's homily focused on the Good Shepherd and on priestly vocations, with a passing acknowledgement of religious life and the married life, but no mention of deacons, let alone women deacons. So our question is, how do we include a wider array of vocations in our discussion of what it means to be a person of faith, and how each of us is called to listen to God's call?
Yeah, well, that's what I wrote for this little book. My little contribution for Vocation Sunday is, this was always, if you were ever in the 6th grade, this was when you had the talk. And the talk was generally, Father came in to talk to the altar boys. And the problem is that we are not recognizing that there's such a wide variety of vocations, such as I described, and we just don't focus on them. And we definitely don't talk about the diaconate. And that is, I think, a fault of the clerics who and bishops who don't quite know what to make of deacons. The history of the diaconate is very interesting. The diaconate was very, very powerful, and it kind of petered out by the 12th century because the priests got more powerful and really didn't like the power of the deacons. What was the power of the deacons? The power of the deacons was they control the money. So by the 12th century, we find that the cursus honorum, this group of steps, first you're tonsured and become a lector, a porter, exorcist, acolyte, and then subdeacon, deacon. Well, by the 12th century, we have law, and law is saying you cannot be ordained, really, most people cannot be ordained a deacon unless they're on the way to priesthood, and one must be ordained a deacon before he is a priest. We have actually in our history 37 men deacons who were elected pope, and many of them were never priests. They were ordained as bishops and became popes. So there's a lot of conflict because, and it makes sense that you would hire or you would choose, the people of God would choose actually the deacon who had been running the diocese anyway as the next bishop, and the priests, as I said, didn't like it. Well, then the diaconate by the 12th century became really ceremonial and highly liturgical. And it's taken a long time, I think, to get away from that. Now, with after the Second Vatican Council, we have the restoration of the diaconate as a permanent vocation. And I think we mostly see it as a liturgical role. In some dioceses, Diocese of Toronto, actually, you have to have a parish as a deacon, a parish, and a ministry. You need to be a minister to the poor somehow, or to a prison. But in some places, the deacons, it's almost a makeshift thing. The first idea is that the deacon is in a parish, generally his own parish, and kind of gets make work. The other part of that is that the diaconate has, in some places, become a credential and is putting some lay people, particularly lay religious, women religious, out of work. Either as parish life coordinators, Canon 517, paragraph 2, parish life coordinators, or, other jobs. The chancellor of the diocese is in many places a lay job. but it's sometimes preferable to have a deacon, and some bishops prefer to have men working for them. So, but to direct to the question, yes, we need to understand the vocations. Obviously, you know, the gospel is Good Shepherd. I'll tell you, in my parish, I don't think anybody talked at all about vocation to anything. But I also find it difficult that for many clerics, vocation to women's religious life is just not spoken about. I've had priests say to me, well, why would you ever have anybody do that? All they'll do is become caretakers to old women, you know. And I think that there is combined with that, a fear of women. So obviously not a vocation to the diaconate, and let alone female deacons. I think ask why you didn't speak about the diaconate. Ask why you didn't speak about religious life for men and for women. Ask why you didn't speak about marriage. I gave you the lay of the land. There's a lot of different ways to mix it up in our church, and we need shepherds. We need more people to take on the role of shepherd, and by that I don't mean as ordained priests. I say a lot. We don't need more priests. We need more ministry, because that's what the people need. Anyway, Colleen, go.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I mean, even it's embedded in the title for tonight's conversation. You know, it's a call to service, and so you know, there are lots of different roles for a deacon, but it's considering the larger piece of that vocation, and that it's not just service at the altar. It is ministry and what a minister does. So Phyllis, a question that came in is about really that core understanding. You know, since Vatican II, we've seen the permanent diaconate as a vocation. And so one of the questions that came in is, you know, how is the diaconal call a call to service? And is there a way to make the twofold service of a deacon, you know, service at the altar and also in the community, that call to ministry of a deacon? Is there a way to make that more visible or to make it better understood? Do you think since Vatican II, the understanding of what the vocation to the diaconate is still developing?
Yes, the answer is yes, it is still developing. And the Lumen Gentium 29 speaks about the word, the liturgy, and charity. The deacon is dedicated to word in terms of the prayer, but also in proclaiming the word and ministering in the liturgy. If you have seen, or if you get a chance to be at a liturgy where there is a deacon, the deacon's the one who addresses the assembly directly. Anything that's said directly to the people of God, even the dismissal, for example, is done by the deacon. And charity, and the vocation to charity expands itself to all kinds of service. The questioner asks, you know, what the questioner asks about service. Well, diaconia really means ministry. The Latin, the Greek is diaconia, the Latin is ministre, and it's service, but not necessarily service at table. You know, that's the way it's always misunderstood. In 2015, the Holy Father was speaking at the Philadelphia Seminary, St. Charles Borromeo, to the assembled cardinals and bishops who'd come to hear him speak. And I don't know if the seminarians were in the room or not, but what he said was, you know, in terms of the diaconate, the apostles realized they couldn't do everything. They couldn't care for the community. So they invented, and that was his word. I listened to it about 4 times. They invented the diaconate, and that's very telling because, you know, a sacrament, the sacramental barrier to ordination is the argument that Christ never included men in the Dominical institution, the institution of the Eucharist. But the diaconate is a function of the church, and it's the church ministering to the people of God. I've said this before here, you know, when you went to Mass, you brought your chicken, you brought your blanket, you brought an egg, you brought some money, you gave it to the deacon. The bread and wine became the stuff of the sacrifice. And at the end, if you needed something, you went to the deacon. And the last person on line to get to the deacon was the priest who got his pay. and they didn't like that, and that was the beginning of the end. But let's get to more questions.
You made a good point there that ties into one of our questions about really like the ministry that the deacon puts the church into action. You know, takes the pulpit and brings it out into the street. One of the questions that came in was about, and it may be a false dichotomy, but the ministerial need versus the sacramental need. Oftentimes people will say, you know, we need deacons because we need the sacramental role fulfilled, and then other people will say, no, it's the ministerial need, the church active in these works of charity. And so the questioner says, in considering women deacons, which do you think is of greater need in the church today? The ministerial role women deacons could play in representing the church in service to the public at large, or the sacramental role of having women visible in the church and taking a more formal or recognized leadership role?
Well, I don't think it's either or. I think it's both and. You know, you said the business of taking the pulpit to the street. I think it's also taking the street to the pulpit. And when you have a woman, certainly women religious these days, during COVID, ministering to the people of God, to the poor, I want to hear them on Sunday talking about the gospel. I want to hear people who are actually in the prison, the people who are actually with the children, the people who are actually with the poor. You know, I know someone who works in a food bank, and the latest is, you know, something like 60, 80, 90 sandwiches made today in a small town. You know, and I want to, so I think it's both and. I don't think it's either or. And I think that the preacher learns or has the opportunity and the ability and the right to preach if that preacher has been ministering, the priests living their diaconate and the priests living their lives of prayer. And then those are the people I want to hear on Sunday. People are not stupid. They know what priests or what preacher has been golfing all week, and they know what preacher has not, you know, has been dealing in one way or another with his life and with the life of God and with the people of the parish to whom he is preaching. And so, you know, it can't be either apples or watermelons. I mean, you need all the different flavors of person up there, all the different views of life. But I think that the view of life needs to begin and end with the gospel. And it's the gospel in action, the gospel in prayer, and the gospel in the word of law of God in the liturgy. So.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Phyllis, in the past, we've talked about, you know, the Pope has spoken out and actually said about, you know, allowing women to be installed as lector and acolyte. We had a couple of questions come in on that topic. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what the meaning or the significance of that is, of naming a woman as a lector and acolyte.
Well, they can be named as lectors or acolytes in the second paragraph of the canon that was changed. The first paragraph of the canon was the problem. The first paragraph, I think it's 272, said that only men could be formally installed as lectors or acolytes. Well, the Code of Canon Law that we have now was promulgated in 1983. That's after the suppression of the minor orders of lector, porter, exorcist, and acolyte, and the suppression of the major order of subdeacon. So those minor orders, and actually the major order of subdeacon, were replaced by the installation of as lector and acolyte. It's important because in order to be ordained a deacon, really the main reason to be installed as lector or acolyte is in preparation for the diaconate. The Holy Father was asked, is this a doctrinal change or development? And he basically said yes. And the reason that is because the installation as lector or acolyte includes replacing the suppression of the major order of subdeacon. And that's a very big deal, because he's now saying that women can be installed in these lay ministries, and they're actual lay ministries which have replaced minor orders, the old term, and one major order. So I have an article in the Pastoral Review in London, which is, you can download off my website, in which I discuss the whole question of why is it such a big deal. The big deal is they're letting women on the other side, as I said earlier, the other side of the fence, on the altar. The only real law I know of, and it's not canon law, it's liturgical law, but liturgical law can kind of trump canon law. 1967 Musicum Sacrum, that a mixed choir, male and female, may not sing from within the sanctuary, and that is still on the books. And the third chapter of the book you mentioned, I love the picture. I hate people who show their books, but anyway, I love the picture. The third chapter of this is about misogyny, and all about how the continued laws, we'll say it, keeping women away from the sacred, and Kayla brought that up because it's just disgraceful. It really is. It's embarrassing, and Kayla's point too. It's also, or what I inferred from what she was saying. When the world sees the church not allowing women near the sacred, that says something very serious about the status of women. And so I will blame people who cannot accede to the possibility even of women being restored to the ordained diaconate. I will blame them for the dowry burnings in India. I'll blame them for the female genital mutilation in Africa. I'll blame them for the rapes and murders and beatings of women around, because they're seen as chattel. And in some countries, women still are chattel, their property. So it's not just in the boardroom, and it's not just in the corporate world, or even in the Chancery building. It's women not being able to be to speak in church. That I forget the citation, but that comment in Paul, women shouldn't speak in church, can be heard two ways. One, that it's fake, that it was added after, Paul never said it, or maybe women shouldn't be so chatty in the back row. But anyway.
Well, and I think, Kayla really touched on that point, that, to be the voice for community, and that idea to be able to see the possibility, to, for the young women she works with, it's to be able to see the possibility of having your voice heard, and to have the community come together in that way, in a way where all voices can be heard. A follow-up on that question about the lector and the acolyte, Phyllis, that a number of people asked is, that women, you said women can be installed, but have you heard of any formal installations, or has there been any official action installing women in those roles?
No, I wrote to just kind of a random sample of bishops, and I think they responded as one might assume. Some said they were waiting to see what the USCCB said. Others said that they really hadn't studied the question, and others ignored me. And I think Kayla's point about women being ignored is what we really need to address as a church. I had one pastor actually say, "Don't waste my time with old women." Come on. And I think that I think the more we speak about the way women have been abused by the church, there's a new study out of the University of Florida or Florida State. I always get them mixed up, but it's an American Sociological Association journal. And it basically said that Catholicism is bad for the emotional and physical health of women. It's a study that studied the major denominations and then ranked them according to those that allowed some female leadership and those that didn't. And it's not just Catholicism. Obviously, Southern Baptists and others are included in the more less inclusive, shall we say. I don't like the word inclusive, but shall we say the less inclusive? And I think that's a term they use. And the stunning part of it is that religion was always assumed, that religious people who attended religious services, people who had an anchor in God, had better emotional and physical health. And this study, which used extrapolated from other studies, argues that these highly structured, one might say, they use the term non-inclusive, but that to me is a little too political. Highly structured religions that don't allow for female participation are bad for the health of the women who, emotional and physical health of the women who attend. So.
Yeah, and I think a number of people in the chat have been pointing to different bishops who have embraced the Pope's speaking about lector and acolyte. Bishop McKnight in Jefferson City, Bishop McElroy out in San Diego has spoken on that, and there's some hope there. And so it's seeing it put into action, I think, is the next piece. A question that came in, Phyllis. The questioner says, I often feel like the discussion about women deacons, about women in the church, I feel like it's such an uphill struggle. It's an uphill battle. But they say, I'm encouraged by your example, by these conversations, by what you've done, Dr. Zagano. And so the question is, what keeps you going? What gives you hope?
I'll begin and end with what it's about. It's about the gospel. I think the answer to any question we have is to be found in the gospel. What gives me hope is that I really think that the Spirit is moving in the church. If the church needs the assistance and ministry of women as deacons, it will not be denied. I think that there's a lot of chaff around, there's discussion that, oh, this means women priests. Well, it doesn't. Oh, this means women in power. Well, it doesn't. Oh, this means people, this means whatever it means. What gives me hope is the over 200 folks who are with us tonight. Kayla August certainly gives me hope. Mother Teresa said many times, or at least once that I know of, our job is not to be successful. Our job is to be faithful. What I do, I hope, is preaching in a way that I can. They won't let me on the altar, but they can't keep me away from Zoom. So what gives me hope is and the usual accoutrement of spiritual life. I do take time to go on retreat. I do take time to pray. I do take time to spend time with the spiritual director. So I don't have any special battery pack and I certainly do get discouraged and angry with stupidity, with misogyny. And I'm not going to stop talking about stupidity and misogyny. But I think that, and you give me hope. I mean, people who are so much younger than I am are just trying to keep on keeping on. The whole Discerning Deacons project, which, is growing up. I think the where I found the Kayla August tape was in a website called Receive Her in the Lord. And that's where the St. Phoebe event was. But, and I think there are others. I know that the Voice of the Faithful has a program called Building Bridges, where they're trying to have conversations with folks. Sreya Frazier is running that. You know, so that gives me hope. You give me hope. All the folks who are able to say it's our church too.
Yeah, I think it's being able to hold on to hope, and so we can all give one another hope. The fact that we're here. I think picking up on that hopeful line. So often, if you've been to one of these webinars before, you've heard us talk about the dress up guys. It's a fun little throwaway line about deacons who may, they like the accoutrement. But you talked about it, you get letters all the time, Phyllis, and it's not really a question, but I think it's valuable to our discussion. And it came from actually a deacon. And he said, I was a dress up guy. And he's been with us. So he used that term. And he said, my prayer has always been to be assigned to the parish community during liturgy of the persons marginalized outside of parish worship. At the same time, to receive the parish prayers for those who I minister to within the community. And he works in specialized mental health and works with people of all different faith backgrounds. But he assures them of the parish's prayers and accompanies them. And he simply passes on, I think, the hopeful message. He says, keep holding deacons' feet to the fire until women deacons become a reality. So I think even that piece about, hold me accountable as a deacon, saying, hold my feet to the fire, hold, to push the church. So a question that comes out of that is, how to help, how can people who wish to help women who feel called to the diaconate now help? Is there an action step that could be taken right in the here and now?
Well, I don't know that I haven't really looked at the Discerning Deacons website that much, but that just went up today. And that is a lot. I know they've been having conversations with women who feel called to the diaconate. And I think the important thing, in Germany in the 50s, there were diaconal circles of men. And that's how the diaconate was brought up to the Second Vatican Council. There was also comments about women deacons, but that kind of didn't go anyplace. And I think that getting involved with those kinds of discussions with the Discerning Deacons program and with others. In terms of the term was Sunday dress up guys, and it was Archbishop Edwin O'Brien when he was Archbishop of Baltimore, who complained to me about the Sunday dress up guys. And I think that goes on both sides of the street, because the pastor didn't know what to do with them, and the men didn't know what to do with themselves. The only thing they knew is that they were from the community and they would be up there on the altar, hopefully more than just potted palms. And the idea is that a man, I'd much rather hear a deacon talk about marriage on Vocation Sunday. We have a deacon in my parish who I wasn't real sure what he was doing, but I just saw in the bulletin that he was starting with his wife a program for sanation of marriages. During COVID, a lot of people just ran down to the town hall to get married, and he and his wife were running a program about sanating or legalizing church weddings for these folks, and probably also during marriage prep. I don't know. I don't know exactly, the whole ministry, but then I want to hear, I want the fellow who runs the marriage prep to talk about marriage on Vocation Sunday. I want the woman who's running the food bank to talk about feeding the poor, to break open those gospels. So, but it's a work in progress. Everything is. The church, there's no way. People say, well, what did women deacons only did this, women deacons only did that. There's no way of saying what women deacons did exactly at any point in time in any location, because it's all over the map. has to do with the needs of the people of God. And I think in our world today, one of the needs of the people of God is to hear women's voices and voices of men who are actually there ministering in service to speak as well, in addition to, I don't want to put the priests out of business, but I think it's important because the job of the deacon is to preach, receive the gospel, whose herald you are. That's in the ordination ceremony. So.
I think that's important, Phyllis, to be having the conversations both within the church and within communities, within the hierarchical church, within, local parish communities, with, people on the street, so that we can understand what deacons do, why women need to serve in this really important role, and why women are called to that. A number of questions, Phyllis, have come in, and we only have a little bit of time left, about synods. And I'm going to post a link in the chat for past webinars, because we've talked about the Amazonian Synod. We've talked about the past commissions before, all of those things. But one of the questions along the lines of hope is there the possibility of a women's synod, or is there hope of future synods that might address women deacons, or the fact that there are now women who could potentially be voting members in different synods? Is there hope there? Mm-hmm.
In the final few minutes that we have, Colleen, I can say a couple of things. I wrote in Studies, which is the Journal of the Irish Jesuits in Dublin, and I'm pretty sure that's on my website as well, a discussion about the response to the Synod on the Amazon, Create Amazonia, which was the Holy Father's paper. And that talks about synodality and what it is. And I've written elsewhere about synodality. In terms of a voting member of women in the synods, that's a work in progress. Apparently, Sister Nathalie Beckart, who has just been named an undersecretary to the office for synods, may have a vote in the synod. There is a synod coming up, scheduled now for 2022 October. It may be pushed back till 2023 because obviously everything's being pushed back. But there's also a possibility of having more regional synods before that synod in 2022. I haven't heard anything official on that. Will women deacons come up at the next synod? Well, the next synod's on synodality. I don't know. I don't know. I think if the church does not make a decision soon, you see, there have been 5 commissions now. The next commission which replaced mine, should meet in the fall. They haven't met at all, even by Zoom. So that's the fifth commission where the can has literally been kicked down the road. And somebody has to take a decision on this because, as I said earlier, when you have articles coming out, it's very serious and very disturbing to me, when you have articles coming out that say that basically Catholicism is bad for your health, they have to do it. I said this to a bishop I was on Zoom with the other day. I think we talk about the schism being left and right. I think the schism is male-female. And I think a lot of women are just kind of walking away, and I'm seeing more. I saw a number, I think the total I saw was over 300 people in the Roman Catholic Women Priest movement. Well, that's schismatic. I'm sorry to say, but it has a following, and other women are leaving in my own parish. They're telling me, not putting up with this anymore. We're going up to the Episcopal Cathedral. The music's better, and they have women there. So, it's very serious, and I know that I just saw a post that there are 19 bishops who are saying okay with women deacons. Well, there's 194 parish dioceses in the country. So whatever percent that is, it's not 100%. But yeah, I think the answer is we need to keep talking about it, but we can't talk about it without praying about it. And we can't pray about it without having the information. So I appreciate everybody coming. I appreciate your work and the support that you and others have given to the topic and to me. But that's it.
Yeah, I think we can simply continue on. I would direct people over to discerningdeacons.org. They have a wonderful newsletter if you want to sign up for that newsletter. I'm going to post a link to an event that's at Boston College School of Theology and Ministry. It's on Thursday night. I didn't put that in the link there, but that's also a conversation around women deacons. I think, as you said, Phyllis, it's about having the conversation. It's about discernment, really, and that is rooted in prayer. And that's what, Pope Francis constantly points us back to. It's what our vocations comes out of that space of being attentive to the Spirit. And so that's what we're trying to do here and in all of these places. So the more places we can have the conversation, the more critical and the more important that is, and the more hope that it will breed. Hope is a sign of God's presence. So thank you all for being a sign of hope and for being here with us tonight. Thank you, Phyllis, for imbuing us with hope and for, as you said, keep on keeping on, for hanging in there and doing this good work and sharing your research and your knowledge on the topic. I think we always bear the fruit of that. And so it is a great gift and a great grace. And so just to remind you that we will be gathering again in this space, in this Zoom Q&A session space on May 20th, Thursday, May 20th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. There were a number of great links shared today. And so thank you so much for being with us and have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thank you.